I don't care what Adam Schefter says. I don't care what Ian Rappaport says. I don't even care what my guy Jonathan Jones has to say. The Panthers are not going back to Bryce Young. This is Andy Dalton's team.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube, where I am live following every Carolina Panthers game. And anytime some crazy news happens on Monday, which has been the case the last 2 weeks. Hopefully, there won't be big news tomorrow. I'd like to enjoy a quiet Monday after a busy Sunday. Either way, you can check out all the episodes on YouTube, whether they're live. They'll be right there in the feed or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, because on Wednesdays, throughout the entirety of the regular season, I'm right here on the show answering your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions. All you got to do is either at me or DM me. And of course, if you feel like it, follow me on Twitter at Julian Council. It's not required, and you can get all your questions in for the weekly Wednesday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. The Carolina Panthers 36, the Las Vegas Raiders 22. A re-energized Carolina Panther team absolutely trounces the Raiders a week after an anemic loss against the Chargers in Bank of America Stadium, and the Raiders getting an upset win on the road against the Baltimore Ravens. Did anyone see that coming? Anyone? I know Andy Dalton played his ass off last year on the road in Seattle, but we didn't see this kind of energy and effort from the Panthers offensively, defensively, and on special teams in week 3 in that game last season. This was a cathartic Sunday for a lot of people who care about this team, for the folks within that building, for the folks who play on that field, and for me as well, having to talk about this on a daily basis. Congrats to everyone involved, to all the players, to the fans, the front office, even David Tepper, I suppose, for the Carolina Panthers getting a win that they desperately needed. They desperately needed to win this game to provide people with a day to finally feel some joy, to have hope that maybe it can be better. And what do you know? The hope, the joy is Andy Gregory Dalton. The Red Rifle gets it done. 26 of 37, 319 yards, 3 touchdowns, a 123.6 rating. Andy Dalton becomes the first quarterback in the NFL this season with 300-plus passing yards and 3 touchdowns in a game. Did not see that coming, y'all. I did not. And we go back to earlier in the week on Monday when the Panthers made a decision to bench Bryce Young. On Sunday, we heard Dave Canales say not once but twice that Bryce Young is our quarterback. I was of the opinion that the Carolina Panthers were not going to make a change based off of the fact that they fired Frank Reich after 11 games. They fired Scott Fitterer. They brought in Dan Morgan from down the hallway to a new office, that they went out and got Dave Canales, who did wonders with Baker and with Geno, that they put all that money on the offensive line, got Diontae Johnson, brought in Xavier Legette. I did not expect, after 2 weeks, as bad as it was, and I did not sit here the last 2 weeks and defend Bryce Young. I told y'all he was awful. He was a reason that offense was not moving the football down the field. And we saw today yet clearly that this season, week 1 in New Orleans, week 2 at home against Los Angeles, Bryce Young was the problem. I did not expect him to make that change on Monday that they made. And I feel like clearly there was this decision and conversation had between Canales and other people in that organization that led to his entire demeanor to change from Sunday to Monday when we heard from him in the media about the decision to go from Bryce to Andy. I did not expect that to happen, for them to make that decision. But you can't sit here after this game and argue against it and say that it was wrong. And I was someone who didn't like it, in part because I don't think the Panthers have done right by Bryce Young. They put him in a terrible situation last year with the offensive line injuries, which they could not avoid, but still not a good offensive line behind. He was behind last year. No weapons, no run game. The fact that he went from having Frank Reich to Thomas Brown to Frank Reich to Thomas Brown, they did not do right by Bryce Young. They broke him, and we saw a broken Bryce Young in week 1 and week 2 because of the Carolina Panthers failings. This is an organizational failure on the Panthers for what we saw to Bryce Young, but they made the right decision by going to Andy Dalton for the team on Sunday, for the team moving forward, because he gives you what this team needs right now, and that is an experienced veteran quarterback who can get the job done on offense. Like on the surface, it's asinine that they do all that they did to help Bryce Young, then to pull the plug after 2 weeks. But when you watch the results, it's kind of hard to argue. But you can both understand the Panthers screwed Bryce Young, but also made the right decision on Sunday. Both can be true, that they messed him up and that they made the right decision to go to Andy Dalton today in this game and moving forward. And let's not get it twisted. This is Andy Dalton's team. And going back to the very beginning of all of this, March 10th, 2023, when they made the decision to trade up to number 1 with Chicago to draft a quarterback, we knew right then and there they're going to get a rookie. I was of the opinion that I'm not going to sit here and say when the rookie quarterback should play, whether it was going to be Bryce or CJ or Anthony Richardson or Will Levis. I was not going to sit there. I was going to sit, watch the organization, make the decision, and just be about it. If that's what they want to do, play him right away. They want to wait. I wasn't going to sit here and say they need to go out there and play him now or later. I was going to sit, watch. They brought in Andy Dalton, and from the very beginning, it was very clear they wanted to play Bryce Young. They did not work on his fundamentals. They wanted to get him out there. They wanted to see whether they made the right decision by giving up all they gave up to get to number 1 to take him. And that clearly, hindsight being 2020, and maybe you felt like that way back when, was the wrong decision. Because based off of the 18 starts we've seen from Bryce Young and the 2 we've seen from Andy Dalton, Bryce should have sat all or maybe the majority of last season. And at the very least, after Andy stepped in week 3 in Seattle and threw the ball 50 times for 350 plus yards, Bryce should have sat out after that and watched. But they didn't do that. Instead, we're where we're at now. Andy Dalton played his tail off, and I give him a ton of credit. I give the staff a ton of credit, and I give this team a ton of credit for how they played today. And I saw a lot of articles the last 2 days from Adam Schefter of ESPN, Ian Rappaport of NFL Network, my guy Jonathan Jones of CBS Sports, even Diana Rossini from The Athletic, talking about where the Panthers go forward with their quarterback situation and whether Bryce Young gets another opportunity. On Monday, when they made this decision, I told you it's over for Bryce Young. Based on what happened with Trey Lance in San Francisco, what happened with Zach Wilson in New York, what happened with all these quarterbacks in the past, once you bench them, it's over for them. They don't get a second chance. You move on. And that's what's happening here in Carolina. Ian Rappaport wrote this morning for the NFL Network, part of the reason for Young's benching is that everyone must be held accountable in a developmentally minded organization. Quarterback as much as anything. And if Young wasn't progressing, then it was deemed Dalton was the right answer. And Dalton was the right answer, as we saw, and Young was not progressing. But according to Rappaport, the belief is Young will be back, sources say, and when he is, this time out the field will benefit him. While Canales did not detail when Young might play again or how long Dalton will start, sources say they view this as a timeout for Young, not a season-long benching, a time to take a deep breath, let it all slow down, de-stress, and learn by watching. Bryce Young can take a deep breath. He can let it slow down. He can de-stress. He is not going to be the quarterback here in Carolina this year or in the future unless Andy Dalton gets hurt. Because based on what we saw today from Andy, what we saw from Andy last year, what we saw from Bryce Young in those 18 starts, like we can't just look at this in a vacuum, which I've been saying, even with week 1, week 2, we have seen how he's played. We have seen how Dalton has played. We have seen what's been around them. You can't look at it all in the vacuum. You have to take everything into account, and taking everything into account, Andy Dalton's the guy in Carolina for the rest of the year. And possibly, if he continues to play well, and he's not going to throw for 300 bills and 3 touchdowns every week, I don't think. And if he does, they're going to the playoffs probably, and he's going to be the MVP of the league. That's not going to happen as far as probably the playoffs and MVP of the league. Sorry, I'm trying to be positive. We're all positivity today. We're not going to sit here. I'm not going to rant on anybody's parade. Let's just understand, like, it's one game, but be excited because we rarely get these opportunities, and rightfully we overreact because we rarely get the opportunity to sit here and smile on a Sunday or possibly on a Thursday, rarely on a Monday, sometimes on a Saturday. You get where I'm going. It's Andy Dalton's team. And if they even tried to go back to Bryce Young, they're going to have a mutiny on their hands. The players show you who the quarterback is. Nick Saban said that before. Plenty of coaches have said that before. When it comes to quarterback competitions, we never had a quarterback competition here in Carolina the last 2 years. It was always Bryce Young. That's what Reich and his staff wanted to do. That's what Canales and his staff were brought here to do, was have Bryce Young be the quarterback. There was never a competition. But the team showed you today and throughout the week who they want to be the quarterback in Carolina. Adam Thielen showed you last Sunday who he wants to be the quarterback in Carolina. Taylor Moton, who looked at Bryce Young sideways, showed you who he wants to be his quarterback here in Carolina. The team wants Dalton. It wasn't just the offense today. It was how they played on defense. And I get it. They moved the ball down the field. They won the time of possession. You're not going to excuse 9 straight scoring drives in week 1 at New Orleans. You're not going to excuse it. They were terrible week 1 and 2, possibly because the offense couldn't move the ball, but they weren't good. We saw a newfound energy from that defense today where clearly they probably believe if we actually get stops, we could win the game today. Or week 1, week 2, I don't think they had that belief. And that leads me back to this. I don't believe this team believes in Bryce Young. And the team, the players clearly did not believe in Bryce. They maybe voted him as captain, and before they even did the voting, I came over here and I talked to y'all about, is Bryce going to be a captain? We see typically in the NFL, just because he's a starting quarterback, that guy's a captain, but is he actually the leader of the team? We've seen that clearly Bryce Young's not their leader. From his demeanor on the sideline, he's cool, he's calm, and that's just who he is. I'm not going to sit here and say that's why he didn't succeed. But Canales was asked about this by Joe Percy Athletic after the game, about just the energy that you saw from the guys, and is that why you made the quarterback change? And he said it's about everything, but clearly the energy changed today because those guys believe. It's the same energy we saw when Cam Newton said, "I'm back" in Arizona. Those guys believed in Cam. These guys believe in Andy. They don't believe in Bryce. They showed you today they do not believe in Bryce Young. And I hate it for Bryce. I wish him success. It's not going to be here in Carolina. I still want to believe in the right situation where he's not fundamentally screwed by a terrible owner and a bad situation, that he can have success. But it's not going to be here, y'all, because you don't put him back in with Andy Dalton playing even half as good as this, because Bryce has rarely even reached half as good as what Dalton put out there today. So Dalton's the guy rest of the year. This team believes in Andy. I guess Bryce is still captain. You might as well just go ahead and take that C off his chest and put it right there on Andy Dalton's, because this team is behind him. You, the fans, I see, are already behind him and should be. The Panthers are 1-2. There's newfound hope, and we'll see what they can do the rest of the way. But, man, I feel bad for Bryce, but this team clearly did not believe that he was the guy. And Andy Dalton now, he is the Panthers quarterback week 4 and beyond, and possibly in 2025. We'll see how it plays out. But Andy Dalton balled. Ton of credit to him, ton of credit to Dave Canales and the coaching staff and players for getting the job done on Sunday. And as I said, it was an overall team victory. The defense played well. I love what they did on defensive line, the secondary, and Dan Morgan helped directly win this game because of a trade he made way back in March. We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked on Panthers. Football is finally back, which means it's time to order your favorite game day food, snacks, and drinks on DoorDash without missing a play. My ultimate spread on game day is simple. Love me a big hunkin' pizza, pepperoni, throw some sausage. Love me some mushrooms on that as well. Some wings. I'm a dry rub guy. Give me some blue cheese. No ranch. Not a ranch guy at all. Some celery, some carrots, and some chips. And then after, especially tonight, because the Panthers won, there's not going to be any beer. Going to pour me a nice glass of E.H. Taylor. Get me some bourbon straight, not on the rocks. Choose promo code LOCKEDONFALL24, 50% off, up to $10 value when you spend $15 plus on your first order. Limited time offer. Terms apply. Promo is not valid for orders containing alcohol. DoorDash, your door to game day greatness, your door to more. Download the DoorDash app now to order your game day favorites. Must be 21 plus to order. Alcohol, drink responsibly. Alcohol available only in select markets. The Carolina Panthers looked like a renewed, a refreshed, a re-energized team on Sunday in Las Vegas as they just put it on the Raiders 36-22. And that score is not indicative of what we saw in that game today, as it was 33-7 was the score in the fourth quarter, maybe late third quarter. It was already over. The Panthers had wrapped that thing up after Andy Dalton just threw dime after dime. Like, you looked at him in that game on Sunday. The throw to Diontae Johnson for that first touchdown where he's just floats it out there perfectly. The throw to Thielen right before the half, one of the best throws we have seen here in Carolina in a long time, was awesome. Just the way he was surgical on third down. They were finally able to convert. They were in some better situations they had been in the past. Going to talk about that more on tomorrow's show as we get more into the game and what I saw from Panthers that I'm not going to get to today. But Andy Dalton went out there and he played outstanding in the game today. And I love how he played, and I love that he gave us a renewed energy, and we got to see the players just go out there and play amazing based off what we had seen before, where that energy was different. It's just not on offense. It was also on defense. Like, I had concerns about this defensive line after you lost Derek Brown. They were giving 199.5 yards rushing per game, which somehow was only second in the NFL. I'm guessing Dallas must be the worst, and they had problems with Baltimore today as well, as I believe they lost that game. And the Panthers went out there, and they only allowed, let me put it up here. Let me find it because I don't have it right here in front of me. They only allowed 55 yards rushing. 16 attempts for the Raiders, 55 yards rushing, 3.4 yards per carry, and a touchdown. That's what I want to see. I thought this was going to be a better run defense this year in Carolina than what we had seen in the past. I thought with Jadeveon Clowney coming in here, with Shaq Thompson healthy, Josie Jewell knowing the defense, Derek Brown back, adding Ashawn Robinson, they would be a better run defense. But for whatever reason, the first 2 weeks, they were not a good run defense. Today, against the worst run offense in the league, they showed up, and that's a positive sign. I still don't think this is a good run defense based off of what we have seen the other 2 games against teams that actually want to run the football. The Raiders haven't been able to run the ball on anybody so far this year. So the Panthers need to go out there and they need to stonewall them, and they did it. LeBron Ray had a sack. Jaden Peavy, who stepped up now that Derek Brown is out for the rest of the year, did not have Shai Tuttle, who really has not been good for them last year or this year so far. He was out with a foot injury after being listed as doubtful this past week. Those guys stepped up. And to stop the Raiders right there in the third quarter, that's when the game is over. 4th and 1, they try to run a Gardner Minshew up the gut, and they get stonewalled. I was like, it's over. It's a wrap. It was already, I believe, 24-7 at that point in time. They were done. They weren't coming back from that. And the Panthers, man, that's a hell of a way to play on the defensive line. We'll see when they face off against teams that want to run the ball, like Atlanta in a couple weeks, if they're going to be able to actually stop it, because they didn't stop against the Saints who want to run the ball, or against the Chargers who want to run the ball. Pittsburgh stopped today against the Chargers, but they played well today, and I give those guys a lot of credit. I also give the secondary a ton of credit too. They got beat deep early on that Trey Tucker deep ball that led to the Raiders' the only touchdown before garbage time, because the last 2 were garbage time for me, y'all. Once it was 33-7, I started tuning out. I'm typically used to tuning out because the Panthers aren't doing anything, but I tuned out today to get my notes ready for the show because the Panthers had already wrapped up that game. And it's like, all right, let's go ahead and put all the notes together, all the positive things we're going to say about Carolina. But Mike Jackson, he balled, man. 9 tackles, all solo, 3 3 PBUs, pass breakups or pass deflections, and an interception. He was great. Also, J.C. Horn was great. Devontae Adams had a pedestrian day. 4 receptions, 40 yards, was not good. He had a couple drops that you just don't see him drop balls like that on third downs too. Those guys were great. And speaking of Mike Jackson, the Panthers, this goes all the way back to March. And I brought this up on the show before. Dan Morgan traded Diontae Johnson, who they were going to cut. He traded Diontae Johnson and a 6th-round pick to Pittsburgh for Diontae Johnson and a 7th-round pick. He used that 7th-round pick on Michael Barrett, linebacker out of Michigan. Michael Barrett was not going to make this roster, so they traded him over to Seattle for Mike Jackson, who they knew, and because they needed someone to fill in with Dane Jackson being injured with the hamstring, going to miss the first couple weeks of the season. He's out next week. Maybe he'll be back after that, but they need another corner to come in here and help him out. And through 3 weeks, Mike Jackson has been tremendous for Carolina. I had a lot of questions, and y'all did too, about the Panthers' ability to be able to cover on the outside, who would do something opposite of J.C. Horn, if they would be in a good spot at all, and maybe the depth's not where you would like it to be. When they get Dane Jackson back, that's going to even help them even more. Mike Jackson has been, I'm not going to say a revelation, but he's been really good for this team, and he was outstanding today. Dan Morgan making that trade, sending Diontae Johnson and that 6th-round pick to Pittsburgh directly helped the Panthers win this game. Obviously, Andy Dalton was a massive part of it, and having a quarterback who can actually play at an NFL level helps you win games. But making that deal to bring in Mike Jackson, because you were able to trade away Diontae Jackson, and then Diontae Johnson went out there, 8 receptions, 122 yards, a career high 122 yards and a touchdown. Dan Morgan, by trading away Diontae Jackson, directly helped the Panthers win this game today. How many times can you say in the past that what Marty Hurney did in a trade, or what Dave Gettleman did in a trade, or what Scott Fitter did in a trade, directly led to the Carolina Panthers winning a game? Especially in recent memory. How many times have we been able to say that? We can say that directly led to a loss, but no, we have not been able to say in recent memory their decision. And maybe I'm forgetting something. It's possible. There's a lot that happens, and I can't completely I can't just pull out of my head, off the top of my head all the time. But that trade right there, if there's any question about Dan Morgan, you can point to one thing and say he helped his team win games by doing that. And he absolutely helped his team by sending Diontae Jackson, a 6th-round pick, to Pittsburgh to bring in Diontae Johnson and eventually flip that 7th-rounder for Mike Jackson, who helped them win this game on Sunday. So credit to the defense. Hajero Vero, his unit was just horrid the first 2 weeks, and we saw more what we saw from them a year ago. And if the offense plays like this, gives them 36 points, they have a chance to win. I still have questions whether this is going to be truly a good defense against better teams. And I know Baltimore lost to this Raiders team last week. Totally get that. Giving them credit today, because you got to give credit when it's due, and it's absolutely due today. Credit to them and how they played. But that effort was different when we've seen the past couple weeks, which leads me back to those players did not trust Bryce Young. It was the day of first on Sunday, and we have been waiting a long time to hear it. The first time the Panthers have done this since. We'll talk about it here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page when you place your bets. And I'm going to have to go to FanDuel after this game, and I'd like to start looking at Andy Dalton MVP odds. And no, I'm not interested in Andy Dalton comeback player of the year odds. I'm interested in Andy Dalton MVP odds over on FanDuel. So I'm going to go check those out. Hey, put down some coin on that and see where it gets me. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Sunday was a day of first since for the Carolina Panthers, the first fourth-quarter lead since Week 17 at Tampa Bay in 2022, that de facto NFC South championship game where I wonder if the Panthers win and go to the playoffs, is Steve Wilkes the head coach here in Carolina today? We'll never know because they did not win that game. Sam Darnold, who is now 3-0 with the Minnesota Vikings, was the starting quarterback that day. Tom Brady, who's now calling games on Fox, replacing our guy Greg Olsen, who is so much better than Tom Brady, by the way. He was the starting quarterback for Tampa Bay that day. The Panthers went 20 games without a fourth-quarter lead. Somehow won 2 games. And that was the most impressive thing I saw from last year during that hellacious 2-15 season. The Panthers won 2 games without ever leading in the fourth quarter. How? Walk off against Houston, walk off against Atlanta in the driving rain, and you'll take it because it's a lot better to know in 17. But the Panthers had not led in the fourth quarter since Week 17. And think about it, too, Week 18 at New Orleans that year, the Panthers had a walk-off win in order to win that game in that Week 18 matchup. And speaking of that Week 18 matchup, this is the first road win since Week 18 in 2022 at New Orleans, where Andy Dalton was the starting quarterback for the Saints. The first opening drive touchdown also in 21 games. Diontae Johnson became the first Panther with 100+ yards receiving in 13 games. First halftime lead since week 10 at Chicago on Thursday Night Football when Amir Smith-Marset had a punt return in the first half, which I believe was the only touchdown the Panthers scored that day, as the quota last year was they were only allowed a touchdown per game, going plenty of games without a touchdown, and that was the last time they had a first half lead. So there we are. First since for the Carolina Panthers, and that is why I saw a ton of joy. And I mean, they won, man, but you see even more smiles from people based off of just the fact that this franchise has beaten its fans. I mean, not even beaten them. They have bludgeoned their fans into oblivion. Y'all, me, someone who has come up here, grew up in the city, grew up going to games with my dad, and still, of course, loves his team. Like I've covered in a different capacity. Like I can't just be a fanboy up here. Maybe some of y'all want that. It's just not me. So I've got to take a step back a little bit. But obviously, yeah, emotionally, like it's tough to sit here and feel like, man, I'm getting paid to do it. Like I enjoy doing this. It's a blessing to be able to grow up in the city and be able to have a platform like this from Locked On and be able to talk about the hometown team. But a lot of times, like, damn, like you feel like you're wasting a lot of your time because it's like this team doesn't do anything right. They don't win games. But days like this, it's awesome to be able to be a part of this. I'm happy for everybody who's a fan of this team, happy for all the guys involved, because we don't get a lot of these days, man. And I had a guy hit me up in my DMs. It's funny because more of y'all hit me up on in my DMs on Twitter at Julian Council when the Panthers are losing than you do when they're winning. So come on. Don't come at me and tell me at times I'm not being positive enough when y'all aren't going to hit me up in my DMs when things are going good. So I need more of y'all with good things going on to hit me up. Now, plenty of y'all did it after the game. I had a guy say, like, let's go, Julian. You have some content to talk about this week. I've had plenty of content. Just has not been positive content to talk about this week, in the past couple of weeks, at least the first 2 weeks of the season. But it was great. Looking back at some of the mentions, I had somebody being like, I can't wait to hear you happy on the pod for once. You deserve this. Yes, I do, Michael Davis. I do deserve this. Someone who has depressed Panther fan on Twitter, they said, really looking forward to today's podcast. And it's fun. Like, this is the 15th time. I put this in the live chat before coming on here today and starting the 15th time since I took over this podcast back in March of 2021. Only 15 times have I been able to come here after a regular season game and talk about a win. It started off 3-0, where they won against the Jets, New Orleans, and then Thursday night in Houston, and then it went down the hill. Like, it's crazy to me that the first 3 games I did as a podcast host here at Locked On Panthers, they won, and they've only won 12 times since then. Like, it's not about me, but it's insane. But I'm happy to see them get a win. I'm happy for all y'all, and a first time since forever for a lot of the things the Panthers did today. Now, the great thing about today is that it gives Carolina Panthers and the fans hope moving forward. In the interim, the Panthers have a quarterback. It's Andy Dalton. They still have a long-term question of who is going to be the franchise. That's not really important right now. They continue to develop Bryce behind the scenes. They'll move off of him, I imagine, after the season. Like, it's Dalton. It's his job. He believed coming in this week that he can still play. We saw last year he can still play. We saw today he can still play. Is he going to play at this level every week? Probably not. It's possible. It's not. I doubt he's going to play like this every week, but he's going to give them a chance to win games more often than not. Like, he'll have his stinker, I'm sure, because everybody has a bad game. He'll have his mid games. Like, most times he's going to give the Panthers a chance to win. And we cannot right now say that about Bryce Young based off of the 18-game sample size dating back to last year and the 2 games we saw this year that were worse than anything we ever saw last year in 2023. So in the interim, they have their quarterback, and they have a team that's re-energized and believes in that quarterback because they clearly did not believe in the guy before. So we'll see what this means moving forward. Cincinnati, I don't know when they play. I don't think they play today. Maybe they play on Monday night. I'm not quite sure, but that's going to be a team where, and I'm going to sit here, I'm going to beg y'all, and it's maybe already too late after what they did to start off the season. There's a lot of people from Ohio who live in the great city of Charlotte. A lot of people who say they love Ohio, but yet they don't live there. Same thing with people from Buffalo. They love Buffalo, but don't live in Buffalo. They come down to Charlotte and they pollute our city with their blue cheese and wing sauce and Bill's paraphernalia and all their Ohio-ness as well. Please show up to the game on Sunday. Please. Please show up to the game on Sunday at Bank of America Stadium. A ton of Bengal fans are going to be there. Welcome these guys back, man. Please, if you can afford it, please go to the game on Sunday and support these guys. I don't want to see another stadium takeover. It's likely already going to happen based off of just the fact that all the Bengal fans live here. You'll probably sold your tickets after the Panthers got off to an 0-2 start, or maybe you did it back in the summer to make money. I get it, I suppose. But show up for these guys. Like, there's something to believe in now as far as you have a quarterback can help you win games. You have a receiver that is dynamic in Diontae Johnson. You got to see what Xavier Legette could do. You saw Chuba Hubbard out there getting it done on the ground as he ran for on 114 yards. Like, you got a chance now offensively to get some things done. The offensive line, they held up. The sacks that we saw, like one of them, Jatavion Sanders, and this goes back to the whole Ian Thomas thing, y'all. If you look at Ian Thomas, somebody who's going to make plays in the pass game, you're looking at the wrong way. He helps them as far as blocking goes in the run game and also protecting the quarterback. JT Sanders completely had no idea what he was doing, and he's not been good to start off the year. You look at his PFF rating, only one sample size. He's had like a 35 and a 40 rating. He has not been good for them so far. So they're not going to have Ian Thomas for a couple weeks. It would be nice to get Ian Thomas back for that. But also, JT Sanders only get better by playing, I suppose. But maybe he could benefit from watching as well. That's the sack they gave up. There's another time where someone also just did not. It was blown assignments. It wasn't like the offensive line was getting manhandled. Just blew 2 assignments. So they protected Andy, and they protected Bryce the past 2 weeks. So you got an O-line that can road grade when they're dedicated to it. And we saw 28 carries from Chuba and Miles Sanders today. They had 28 carries combined the first 2 weeks. We saw a dedicated run game. We saw an offensive line that was able to help in a run game, be able to protect. We saw receivers open, making plays after the catch. Oh, my God. Can you believe it? These are things that we see all the time. Darren Gant, my good buddy who writes for Panthers.com, he wrote on Twitter, like, this is what a normal NFL game is. This is what you see every week across the league, except in Charlotte. We got to see it today. And hope we'll see it next week and moving forward with Andy Dalton as Carolina Panthers quarterback, and this defense also giving a far greater effort against what is a suspect Raiders offense. Let's understand that. So we'll see what they look like. Like Cincinnati, that'll be a big test. I don't really know what the health situation for T. Higgins is, and like Jamar Chase hasn't really looked right so far. But that's a desperate Bengals team, depending on whether it be 0-3 or 1-2. But still, that's going to be a Bengals offense where the Panthers can be tested, especially in the pass game. And they passed the test today. I think Gardner Minshew is not going to kill you in the pass, but they still have Devontae Adams. And they did a great job bracketing him in the game. So there's hope now that your Sundays are not going to be completely wasted with your eyes bleeding watching the Panthers not do anything on offense. That should not be the case. It may happen again at some point this year, just based off of like what Ron Rivera said that one time in Pittsburgh. Ish happens. Hopefully ish doesn't happen this year. Everyone has a bad day, so it could. Even with Andy Dalton in there, it could happen. Hopefully it doesn't, but ish happens sometimes. You now have an offense with a quarterback that you can believe can move down the field and get the ball into the playmaker's hands and get some things done, and a defense that has shown that it's capable to actually get off the field. So that provides hope, and that's all people have been wanting is hope. And on Monday, you wondered whether it was hope, and I wondered, like, where's the hope? When David Tepper owns a team, he keeps making all these bad decisions. There at least is hope right now that Andy Dalton can carry this team to being respectable, to being competitive, and keep them alive for now. Like, there's still 13 games left in the season, and even the last 2 weeks when everything looked bad, I said, like, look, I mean, they look terrible, and they're probably not going to be a playoff team, and I still don't feel like they're a playoff team based off even one game, but also we saw the first 2 weeks and other facets of the game. But there's 13 games left to go. There were 15 games left to go. There were 16 games left to go. A long season. It's a week-to-week league. First 2 weeks didn't feel great. This week you feel good, and we'll see how you feel next week. But you got to keep going at it day after day if you're the Panthers. Make all the right adjustments, move forward, get better, stay healthy if you can, and get healthy if you can, and see what happens. Like, so we'll see. 1-2. I think someone pointed out they're one game out of the division. Long way to go. We'll see what works out. But there is now hope that this is not going to be a completely lost season. It's a lost season in terms of who's going to be your long-term quarterback, because it's not going to be Bryce Young. But it cannot be lost in terms of being able to evaluate the rest of the roster. And potentially, I don't know, being in the hunt. We'll see. So a lot of things I got to see from them to really believe in that. But I do believe they have an offense that is functional and an offense that can get things done when needed on Sundays moving forward. So that is certainly an upgrade from what I believe heading into this game at 4:05 Eastern time earlier today. But that's going to wrap up This edition of Locked On Panthers podcast by Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe, follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And thank you, 548 people live with me right now as I'm closing out. Appreciate every single one of y'all who comes on, watches the shows. Last week has been, I think, probably the highest watched weeks I've ever had since being on YouTube. Close to 10,000 subscribers. Would love to get there. So please help me. Tell your friends about it. Steal your grandparents' cell phones and go on like YouTube and subscribe for me if you can. Do whatever you got to do. So appreciate everybody who's tuned in, whether it's been for wins or losses, all the bad news, all the good news. Thank you all to everybody who's come up here, watch this live. I'll be back live again next Sunday and live anytime there's any breaking news. And please, God, don't let it be tomorrow unless it's trading Bryce Young, which I think is not what they need to do. So they should keep him around, which I meant to say early on the show. Keep him around because you need a backup, even if you don't want to play him. Maybe bring somebody off the street if you're going to trade him now, but whatever. So there's all that. But again, follow me on Twitter at Julian Council, at me, DM me, where I'll be back on Wednesday answering your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions. And as I always say, be happy, be whole, keep pounding. Wait, no, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding. And I'll talk to y'all on Tuesday, where we get to continue to celebrate this win against the Raiders.